mother for completion of our dedication on this ritual, and then my friend will free talk as long as he enjoys and pleases and feels inspired to speak. My dear Dr. Butler, who was so kind to show up, and be very interesting and amazing how he showed up today when I have been planning to see him for last God knows how many years. So I think mother is very kind and sweet, but a little bit, but it's spooky also, I think. So I am very, very grateful to all of you for your kind presence, and I believe that now as I feel mother mysteriously showed up here. I did not invite her, she on her own showed up. I was planning to go to India, and then my one friend showed up that I will stay here with you for God knows how long. So I thought then maybe you can do something, and it is done. And then you are all here with God's grace. So now you can blow counsel or whatever, some instruments if you have, and I will blow the counsel, and then my friend will bless us. Freely he will tell what is Mother Durga, and he's in white skin and I am in brown skin, but I think he is much more scholarly and much more just sweet and kind in his compassion and expression. So it is like mother's very sweet and kind grace that he showed up today, when for the first time we are having this mother's installation ceremony here. So thank you, Mama. Om, Om, Om. Om, Om, Om. Have a seat, and ready for you.
Swamiji, do you mind if I sit next to him?
No, but rest. Take this from the seat.
No, I would rather sit on the floor.
No, sit with him.
Thank you.
Now we will
Yes, this is very mysterious that we showed up. I met Shanti on Facebook, of all things. And we've been wanting to meet each other. And today's the day with the Mother Durga's blessings. I think the last time I spoke in front of a group was 17 years ago. So I've been quiet for a while. I was taught to see the universe as a play of consciousness. And this word consciousness has always fascinated and intrigued me. What is consciousness? And the best description I've come up with is that consciousness is a unconditioned, unmodified, undifferentiated, undefined, formless awareness of being. Something in us is aware of being, and that is consciousness. And there's only one consciousness. There are not two or more consciousnesses out here. one consciousness peers from all these pairs of eyes simultaneously. One consciousness hears and understands these words. And when we identify with consciousness and are absorbed in consciousness, that's the perfect meditation. Meditation is to be absorbed in consciousness, which is also light. We can be absorbed in light. In Sanskrit, there are these two words, prakasha and vimarsha. And prakasha is that which illuminates all that is seen. These are the prakasha and vimarsha, the two aspects of consciousness. Prakasha illuminates all that is seen. And vimarsha understands and knows that which is illuminated. And right now, consciousness is experiencing itself through us. We are embodiments of pure consciousness, no matter who else we think we are. We say it's awareness of being, and once we want to be something, this name, this person, this body, then consciousness contracts into the form of whatever it thinks it is. And so right now we are consciousness experiencing ourselves as these people, getting together on this glorious day. And so my practice has long been just seeing everything as the play of consciousness. And no matter what I go through or experience, just a few months ago in April I had an open heart surgery, which is not something I planned on or hoped for. And while I was in the hospital preparing for the surgery, I kept telling myself, this is consciousness experiencing itself as a 72-year-old man having open heart surgery. Consciousness wants to see what this is like, far out. And so I kind of made it through that way. The experience wasn't as bad as I'd feared it might be. But whatever happens during the day, I remind myself, consciousness is experiencing this. Because consciousness is always exploring, surveying, seeing and knowing itself. Because all that's out there is a play of consciousness, delighting in itself. Consciousness doesn't take itself very seriously. Only the ego is serious. Consciousness is very playful, childlike. You probably noticed Shanti can be childlike at times. And the true self of all of us is very childlike, very simple. Without all the pretensions of adulthood. I'm very happy to be with all of you today, and my wife Kay is also very happy.
And we apologize for being late. I thought it started at 12:30 and we should not come before 12:30.
I have no apologies. I thought we made it a perfect time.
Yes, welcome.
I believe in seeing everything as perfect as it is. were saying, God, you made a mistake. You should listen to me. I have a better idea. Anyway, it's nice being here.
Thank you. If anyone wants to ask anything or you want to share your thing, feel free. Otherwise, food is ready for all of us.
I just wanted to ask too that Shanti teaches non-doing, which means no free will for the person.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember reading recently on your post on Facebook that you mentioned that you believe in free will. Would you be able to explain your perspective of free will for those of us?
My perspective of free will is that we have the free will to think consciously, to think what we choose to think. And most people go around on automatic, thinking whatever they're programmed to think, whatever they're conditioned to think. And it just goes on and on and on. It's automatic. Doesn't stop. Doesn't take a break. So, in a sense, consciousness is that which exists between every two thoughts. If you can ever squeeze a space in there, that's pure consciousness. So, we have the free will to think what we choose, which determines how we act, which determines the consequences of our actions, which is karma, cause and effect. So we do have the free will to think what we choose. Shanti talks about the will he's talking about is the ego will, self-will, being the doer. And the ego gets the ego is that part of which just feels separate from the whole, separate from each other, and defines itself, I am this and I am that, and so on and so on. And so it has its own ideas about what it wants to do, which is basically a karma-created machine, and the ego creates karma and experiences karma for a whole lifetime and beyond. And in sadhana, we learn to go beyond the ego, to see the automaton for what it is and to just observe it, to be the witness, the observer. And then we can act dharmically, or according to dharma, instead of according to ego will. So it's good to be the non-doer, or I guess even being the non-doer would be doing. But to not get caught up in being the doer. To see that if everything is a play of consciousness, everything is happening perfectly. I challenge any of you to stop. You can lay down in your bed and say, I quit. I'm never doing anything again. This is it. And then before long, you'll be thinking, I wonder what's in the refrigerator. And you'll be trying towards the kitchen. Life goes on, with or without us, so to speak. And so, as the observer, we can watch the game of this life with great equanimity and with peace and with love in our heart. And if we see the consciousness in each other, if we see God in each other, then we can easily love each other. We love the consciousness in every being we see. I have a roundabout way of speaking. Does anyone else have a question?
Can you share a little bit about your background and how you...
Sure. Can I check out what his question is? And what's your question?
Well, it's in regards to pure consciousness, which is universal. So it seems like when a new human being is formed, or a new life form is created, pure consciousness enters that life form. And then when it's born, the collective consciousness that is already moving in its relative location shapes and forms it, because after all, it's dependent on the collective to evolve and to survive. So it kind of gets an imprint. Consciousness is kind of like a water that gets an imprint of its relative location from birth to death. But then it seems like sometimes those little sections of consciousness reach this fractal breaking point where they can engage in something that I call metacognition, where you could pause and then look back through a mirror at all of your thoughts in transparency and move them around and reshape who you are, like in the source code. And
You have a lot of background that I don't know anything about, a lot of the words you're using.
metacognition.
Consciousness has no beginning or end. It never begins and it never ends. It sounds like you're talking about a human life, an individual life, a physical life from birth to death.
Yeah.
Well, actually, we live in a subtle body, sometimes called the astral body, which contains our higher intellect, our conscious mind, memory, and ego. And this is actually what incarnates into a body and departs from a body, and it goes from one body to another in a series of incarnations, each of which takes up where the last one left off, as far as our expansion of consciousness. And thus we find very bright babies and some very dull adults in this world, because some have done more sadhana than previous lives. So consciousness is not being born or dying, it's simply the subtle body
Yeah, I didn't mean to
going
make
into a
it sound
physical
like-
body in the first inhalation and then departing on the final exhalation
Right. But
for a
it's,
cycle of karma.
yeah, it seems to me that there's a two-way process of shaping. Consciousness shapes matter, and then the imprint that the temporary material life somehow goes back and shapes consciousness as well. How consciousness gains something from a life.
Consciousness is like the ocean. An individual life is like a drop. And although it contains all the properties of the ocean, it can't really shape the ocean or change the ocean. It's just part of the ocean. So, I don't know, I'll write a course, maybe you should take my course. Forget these big words,
One
But-
thing I'd like to respond to that you said before, you said that, in the beginning, you said that consciousness enters into this being that's being created. Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, that seems complicated because we were taught that consciousness becomes the reality, the physical reality, that there's no third party. Am I saying this wrong?
No, you're not saying it right. Our guru, who's Baba Muktananda, was once asked by a reporter, "Do you see consciousness in that tree?" And Baba said, "No, I see consciousness as that tree." So it's like the body is not a container of consciousness. There's nothing separate from consciousness to contain it. Consciousness has become this human body with mind, emotions, and all the rest that we're capable of. Consciousness is everything. There's nothing that can act upon it. So, shall I keep talking, Shanti? Am I overstaying my welcome?
No, I'm not bad, you all enjoy it, just, whenever you all want, the food is ready, it's now up to you and all.
What did you want me to?
Just
You had another
share a
question.
little bit about
Okay, please.
Is there another question?
Move on, you had another question.
What's your background, I guess?
Where you're
Yeah,
from.
what is your
Right,
background? and-
I don't know you.
I first discovered yoga and meditation at the age of 15, living in Vicksburg, Mississippi, 1960, which is not really a place of great yoga, a place or time of higher understanding. And it befuddles me how this came about. But in high school, the other kids were studying geography and arithmetic, and I was reading Paramahansa Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi, and it's just a whole other world. And I moved to New York City, 1968, and there I began a period of great spiritual promiscuity and studied with all the teachers I could find, all the visiting yogis and swamis from India, and anyone who would talk about this higher understanding that caused life to make sense. Nothing had ever made sense to me before I found this stuff. And then in I studied a lot with Ram Dass during the 70s, and he told me about Muktananda. And in 1974, Muktananda came to New York City, and I went to meet him. I was put in a room, I don't know, maybe about this size, with about 20 people on the floor. I drink when I talk.
Yeah, Marty said when he was clearing his throat again and again, in the meditation, that was a physical thing rather than let's get going kind of thing.
I was giving a talk somewhere, and afterwards this woman was talking to some people, and she said, this guy, he was obviously inebriated while he was speaking, but not only that, he kept drinking during his whole talk.
Oh.
You better tell them what they don't already know, that it's pure spring water.
Oh, yeah. Spring water.
It's usually Poland spring sparkling water, but today he's got spring water.
Anyway, I went to see Baba in Manhattan in 1974. We were sitting in a room waiting for him. I was sitting on the floor. I could sit on the floor easily in those days. And I heard the door open behind me, and I turned to see if it was him. And the first thing I noticed was he smacked me hard on the shoulder with the palm of his hand, knocking me over off balance. And I was thinking, what on earth, what kind of person is this? And I sat up, and he laughed and made his way up to his chair. And as I sat back up, I felt this incredible euphoric energy going up my spine, out the top of my head. My body started filling with white light, and the white light was going out the top of my head like a fountain into the whole room. And the room became diaphanous, where I was like looking through it. I could see through everything. I could vaguely see everyone's forms, and everything was there, but I was seeing through it to like a homogeneous reality beyond the appearance. And my first thought when my mind began to work again was, this must be why people have a guru. Because before that I never understood that that a guru could cause you to experience something that you couldn't cause yourself to experience, which was new for me. But he did. I'd read about Kundalini for years, but I never experienced it like that. He was said to have the power of Shaktipat to spontaneously awaken spiritual energy. Anyway, we each went up to him to ask a question, and I went to ask mine, and I had no idea what I would ask, but what I blurted when I got in front of him was, how can I be conscious of God every moment of every day? And Baba said, why do you want something you don't already have? Said you should, if you get something you don't already have, then you can also lose it. He said, discover what it is that you always already have that can never be taken away from you, and you'll be conscious of God every moment, every day. And so, somehow, about a year after that, I began writing a correspondence course for him and his yoga. And this went on for about 20 years. And I traveled around the world leading weekend workshops with groups. And I learned a great deal during this time. And 2002, I retired from my official representation of them, and Kay and I moved to Hartford, and I took a 6-year sabbatical. It just was a hermit, because I'd been in front of people for 20 years, but I was really happy to be away from people after all that time. And then in 2008, I began writing a course that the lessons go out online all around the world. And the name of the course is Living in the Truth of the Present Moment, which focuses on just being present now. And the truth is not what we're thinking, not our aching back, not our raging feelings. The truth is that pure consciousness, that awareness of being. So living in the truth of the present moment is living in the awareness of awareness, or the being conscious of consciousness. It's a great practice. Okay? Thank all of you for welcoming us so warmly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
वहीं घर में तो कुछ भोजन करें वहीं जैसे आपकी मौज है अब आपके ऊपर